welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today we're going to be doing the top performers from week 2. So this is going to be everybody by position. We're going to have the top 5 for each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And then I'll have a couple other notable performers down below. Keep in mind this is before the Monday night game, so these will be everybody that's played up until that point. Without further ado, I'll get started. So we're going to start with the quarterbacks. This is based on ESPN scoring. This is 6-point passing touchdown scoring 2 from the league that I was using it in. So if you got Russell Wilson, 4-point passing touchdown league, he's going to have about 10 less points. So he's still got 33.42, which is really good in that format as well. I think that actually moves Dak Prescott up to the number 1 quarterback. But without further ado, this is the list that we got. So we had Russell Wilson. He completed 21 out of 28 passes, 288 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 39 rushing yards. He had a great game. Looks like they're going to let Russ cook in Seattle, as the people like to say it. So expect more of the same from him. Expect him to have a great season. Next one we got is Josh Allen. He completed 24 out of 35 passes, 417 yards. So we went from seeing Josh Allen never having a 300-yard game to having 300 plus yards in back-to-back weeks. This one's obviously over 400 yards. It was against the Dolphins, so that might be part of it. He had 417 yards total, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and only 18 yards rushing. So he didn't look to run the ball as much in this game. It'll be interesting to see how the Bills play out over the season. Feel free using Josh Allen as a starter throughout the rest of the season. And then we had Dak Prescott, completed 34 out of 47 passes, 450 yards. So quite a bit of yards. He only had 1 passing touchdown, which was to tight end Dalton Schultz. He ended up with 18 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So his rushing touchdowns really pushed him over the edge today. Dak has been known to be a quarterback that does score rushing touchdowns. So he's definitely a solid play going forward. And just keep like I said in my live thing, just keep an eye out for Tyron Smith, offensive tackle. I haven't watched the game for that. I haven't watched the Cowboys-Falcons game yet, so I'll have to see how the left tackle replacing him did. Then we had Cam Newton, was 30 out of 44. If you watched this game last night, it was a great game going back and forth between the Patriots and the Seahawks. Cam Newton and Russell Wilson both played well. Cam Newton ended up with 397 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He also chipped in on the ground with 47 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Could have had a third one, but he got stuffed at the goal line on the final play of the game. Next, we had Matt Ryan, who is 24 out of 36, 276 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 16 rushing yards. I guess technically I haven't been saying all the points, but they're pretty much all up there on the screen for you guys. Then the other notable performances we had was Ryan Tannehill. He had 4 touchdowns. He was very efficient throwing the ball. Kyler Murray, he looked pretty good throwing the ball. I believe he had 1 passing touchdown and 2 rushing touchdowns. So he had a great game all around. And Joe Burrow had his first good game up with 3 passing touchdowns. I know he did throw the ball about 60 times, so that might have inflated his stats a little bit. And then Gardner Minshew, that Minshew Mania magic is back again. He had over 300 yards passing again, 3 touchdowns, ended up with 2 interceptions. They did come out with a loss, but he is definitely helping this team fight. Running backs we got. So Aaron Jones was by far the top performer this week. I believe he had 16 carries. It was 168 yards. He broke off a long 75-yard run against the Lions. He ended up with 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 4 receptions for 68 yards and 1 touchdown. Ended up with 45.6 points. This is going to be in full-point PPR scoring format. And then next up was Leonard Fournette. I believe he had 12 carries for 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 receptions for 13 yards. It's a good sign for him going forward. If you're a Ronald Jones fan or Ronald Jones truther, it's probably a bad sign for him. So look for Fournette to get more of the work going forward. Keep in mind this was against the Panthers' defense is just not good at all against the run. Maybe a theme for this year is going to be start your running backs against the Panthers defense and start your running backs against the Bengals defense, because we got the next 2 guys on, or 2 of the next 3 guys on here also went up against the Bengals defense. Nick Chubb was the next. He had 124 yards, I believe, on 22 carries, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 reception for 9 yards, ended with 26.3 fantasy points. Then we're going to skip down to Kareem Hunt. He also went against the Bengals. I believe he had 10 or 12 carries for 86 yards, 1 touchdown. He had 2 receptions for 15 yards and a touchdown. He ended up with 24.1 fantasy points. Like I said, they went against the Bengals, so if you've got a running back going against the Bengals, you're probably going to want to start him. Christian McCaffrey was the other one up there. He had, I believe, 18 carries for 59 yards, so he wasn't very effective on a per-touch basis, but he ended up having 2 touchdowns. He had 4 receptions for 29 yards, ended up with 24.8 fantasy points in PPR scoring. He also left the game with an ankle injury. Mike Davis came in to replace him, so that's something to watch moving forward. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey was one or if not the top pick in every single draft this year. So if he's hurt, you're obviously going to need to find a replacement for him. With that being said, Saquon Barkley, we do know now that he did tear his ACL. He's probably the number 2 or 3 pick in your draft this year. Obviously, if you're missing him, you're going to need somebody to replace him. We're going to be talking about waiver wire tomorrow, guys to target, especially going into week 3. But with that being said, the other notable performances that there was Ezekiel Elliott, pretty solid overall. David Montgomery had a good game here. He actually left the game for a little bit with a neck injury. Then he kind of came back in. He had a nice reception. He looked good running the ball. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be a guy that we can start rolling out there, unless he's in a terrible matchup. But there's a lot of things to be optimistic about with him. James Robinson, another guy. I kind of didn't expect too much from him this week, but he came out and he kind of proved us wrong. So he's a guy I definitely look for going forward. Probably more of a flex play than anything at this point. And then last but not least, we have Darrell Henderson, who had a great game. I think he had, was it 80? It was about 120 yards of total offense. I think 80-some yards rushing on the ground, then 40 yards, and then he had 40 receiving yards as well. Ended up with 1 touchdown. Cam Akers did leave the game with a rib injury. Malcolm Brown supposedly also has a finger injury now. So Henderson could be somebody to play in week 3. Next up, we got the wide receivers. So top guy was Calvin Ridley. He's continuing his great year so far. He had 10 targets for 7 receptions, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Finishing just shy of 30 fantasy points. Then we had Stephon Diggs up next with a great amount of targets at 13, caught 8 of them for 153 yards, 1 touchdown. He finished just behind Calvin Ridley here. Then next up was Julian Edelman, who had a monster game. He had 11 targets for 8 receptions, 179 yards. So this was a monster game for him. He didn't have any touchdowns, but this is definitely a good sign to see that Cam Newton does trust him, and he's still going to be that number 1 wide receiver in New England. Terry McLaurin was next. He had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 125 yards, and 1 touchdown. This was good to see against Patrick Peterson. I know some people were saying this was a bad matchup, but Patrick Peterson is not what he used to be. McLaurin should be pretty safe going forward. He's really the only guy they have to throw to in Washington. Mike Evans was next. He had to put it chipped in a solid day, especially with Chris Godwin out. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 104 yards, and 1 touchdown. Not too much to say here. Carolina's defense is pretty bad, so this was to be expected. Obviously, if you were in that game, you picked up Scotty Miller, you're probably not going to be the happiest because Scotty Miller didn't do a whole lot. Like I said, Tampa Bay did run the ball quite a bit. The other notable performances that I put down here were Deontay Johnson. He looked solid again, finished with a touchdown as well. Robbie Anderson, I believe he had 9 catches in this one, like around 100 yards. So he's definitely somebody Teddy Bridgewater trusts. I think him and DJ Moore are going to be the 2 primary weapons in Carolina, especially if CMC does miss time. Chase Claypool looked good. He hasn't been playing a lot for Pittsburgh, but he caught all 3 of his targets. He had that long touchdown I'm sure a lot of you already seen. If you haven't, you can look up a replay and you'll be able to find it real quick. And then Braxton Berrios is another one that kind of surprised. He's nothing special, but he was playing in the slot with Jamison Crowder out for the Jets. More or less, if we learned anything from the Jets game, is Sam Darnold's going to throw to the slot receiver no matter who it is. And same can be said for Adam Gase's offense. I know a lot of people were hyping up Chris Herndon this week. I thought he would do pretty well too. I just thought he was going to get targets, but they used him in blocking more than anything. And then CeeDee Lamb, he looked pretty solid. He had over 100 yards against the Falcons, and that's a good sign of things to come with him. Tight ends, we got Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee was the Hig Beast this week. This was a matchup that I did like. I kind of pointed out, I think, in my live stream going into Sunday. But he had 5 targets, 5 receptions, 54 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So obviously the touchdowns bolted him up the board quite a bit. He had 24.4 fantasy points. Then Mike Gesicki was the next one, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 130 yards, 1 touchdown, 27 fantasy points. So he had a great day. I like Gesicki as a breakout this year. I've kind of been saying that. Thought it'd be a decent matchup for him, especially with the Bills linebackers out. It'll be interesting to see how he does going forward. But he's definitely an option to consider playing. If somebody dropped him last week after he didn't have a big week 1, feel free to go after him in waivers. He's a good waiver wire pickup. Just kind of depends on who your other tight end options are at this point. Jonnu Smith's another one. If he's out on your waivers, you need to go get him right now. He had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he broke off a long catch and run at the beginning of the game. He ended up with those 2 touchdowns. He is somebody they want to use heavily in their offense. Travis Kelce was next. He ended up with a whopping 14 targets. He had 9 receptions, 90 yards, 1 touchdown, 24 fantasy points. He had a great day. Pretty much what you expect from Travis Kelce. Maybe he doesn't see 14 targets every game, but he was the guy that had the good matchup in this game against the Chargers' tough defense. Jordan Reed was a guy who, if he had George Kittle out, you could have replaced him with Jordan Reed and been all right. I don't know how many people actually did that. I played him in DFS. He had 8 targets with 7 receptions, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 24 points. So he actually tied Travis Kelce. And he escaped the game without getting hurt, which can't be said for a lot of the other 49ers. Probably in the waiver wire episode, we'll be talking about some of the injuries as well that happened this week. There was quite a bit of them. Obviously, the waiver is going to be affected by the injuries and guys stepping up in the place of these injured players. The other notable performances that we did see was Dalton Schultz. He ended up with 10 targets, I think 9 receptions and a touchdown. That is promising. I don't know if he's going to get that many targets every week at least, but he is somebody to watch out for now. I didn't think he was going to be that good based on his Monday night performance, but he kind of proved me wrong. Mo Alley-Cox was kind of somebody else I like more for DFS than anything, but he had a good game, especially against the Vikings, and with Phil Rivers there, he could have some value if Jack Doyle ever misses time again or he continues to miss time. Noah Fant had a solid other game. He looks like one of the primary pass catchers for the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy did leave with the concussion, so Fant should continue to see work moving forward. Hayden Hurst had a nice bounce back game after a tough week 1. That's pretty much all I got for the top performers. If you guys got anybody else that was a top performer that you think I missed, let me know. Hopefully you guys had some of these top performers on your team. Hopefully you guys weren't hit too much by the injury bug in week 2. I know it affected a lot of teams. Some of mine got affected as well. Paris Campbell was obviously somebody I liked a lot going in this week, and he had one playing. With that being said, we'll be talking about waivers tomorrow. Then we'll be talking about some start-sits later in the week. Should be a good week for fantasy football overall. I'm going to be looking at a lot of data over the next couple days. I'm going to be trying to collect that together, see what I can decipher from it, and put that all in an article, especially when it comes to the snap rate percentages for teams. So I'm going to be looking at how often a guy was actually on the field and how that compares between week 1 and week 2 and why there was differences, if there were any differences. So I'm going to be looking at the biggest ones that are differences. So if a guy played 50% of snaps week 1 and then only played 20% of snaps like week 2, that was like a 30% difference. I'm going to look at that and see why that happened. Or the reverse, a guy played 25% of the snaps week 1, then all of a sudden week 2 he played 80% of the snaps. Those are what I'm going to be looking at more or less. And like I said, that's going to be in an article. It's going to be out on the Podcasting Network once I'm all done with it. Should be later this week. I will let you guys know when that article is out. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this video. Hope you guys all enjoyed. If you liked and enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. I know we were picking up a couple more subscriptions over the past couple of days. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate everybody that joined me on the live stream on Sunday morning before the games. But with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber who hasn't already done so, please hit that notification bell down below. It'll let you know every single time that I post up a video. And then if you guys have any other comments or anything you'd like to see from me going forward, just let me know down in the comments. You can also reach out to me at CoachCraigSports@gmail.com. Be sure to check out the Coach Craig Sports Facebook page as well. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. But like I said, that's pretty much all we got for today. Hope you guys all enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day.